and a bunch of others came out and seconded what he said in 2004 and said Bush better not roll out the dead body. So I guess Obama did it later. WikiLeaks document showed that Pieczenik and I were both attacked by Stratfor. Very upset about the fact that we were saying it wasn't true. He got visited by MI6 and a bunch of other people. I got visited as well, and that was a meeting off record, so I'm not going to get into it and say by who. But, I mean, this is getting to the point where major agencies, foreign agencies, are sending people. I can go online, and there's a famous person coming to see me. I mean, it's getting to that point where they're sniffing around, deciding, I guess, whether they're going to put a bullet in my head or whatever. But the good news is the info's already out there. You kill me, you just make it that much more popular. You kill Pieczenik, that happens. Now, Pieczenik, I don't want to call him a slippery cat. He's not like Bill Clinton. I think he's an honorable guy. But he is, you know, on the inside, the head of psych warfare for the State Department that was over all the major agencies, ran the Camp David Accords, co-wrote a bunch of books with Tom Clancy. He is the composite character that the Jack Ryan's based on, produced a bunch of Hollywood films as well. He's a medical doctor, psychiatrist, and was also a above captain in the Navy, part of a lot of secret operations, part of founding Delta Force. And a lot of the audience loves him. Some of the audience hates him. But you always get interesting information. He's got a new book coming out, Steve Pieczenik Talks. We'll certainly be reading that and carrying it at InfoWarsStore.com. You can find it at StevePieczenik.com. And he joins us to talk about the torture report. I'll tell you my view on the torture. I think torture is extremely effective. I don't think it's effective at getting real information. I don't think it's effective at winning just wars. I think it's effective at getting fake information, fake, false testimonies and confessions, terrorizing populations, and it's very effective at discrediting everything the government does. It's very effective at making you wear the black hat. It's a great way to demonize America, part of the globalist program. One famous individual said the purpose of torture is not getting information, it's spreading fear. Eduardo Galeano. And, yeah, that's a big part of it as well. What do you think tasers are, or the misuse of them and paying compliance? But the reason, yeah, Obama's trying to score points on this right now. The intel I've got is it's still going on. I mean, Joe Biggs was a staff sergeant in the Army in Afghanistan and Iraq, 3 tours, happened to have Hastings embedded with him in 2 of those operations, and they saw some of the biggest battles out there because Biggs always wanted to go where the fighting was. And the Army, they'll send you if you want to do that. And those were written about. But my point is, it's on record. He did the things he says he did. One of his big jobs was delivering people for torture. In fact, I think we ought to later I said it earlier, get Biggs in here to talk about torture. He should be on tomorrow. He should be on a lot because he would deliver people for torture, and sometimes they didn't come out. And guess who was there? DEA, FBI, CIA, you name it. It was all about drug trade, folks. Nothing to do with torturing real terrorists. So there are people getting tortured. It's just not for what you think. They got black sites everywhere. Camp X-Ray has a psychiatric facility within it run by the CIA where they admit they do sexual torture, you name it. Some of that's in the report. It's testing torture. It's a laboratory, but not with white lab mice. It's with 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds, you name it, who 8 years later get deployed as the heads of ISIS. So I see it as a ground to find the psychological candidates to actually be cutouts to lead some of these shadow quack armies like ISIS. Now, that's my view from researching the history. We'll see if former psych warfare chief and black ops tricks master Steve Pieczenik agrees or disagrees. That's quite a compendium I just threw out there, Doc. What do you say?
What I say is, as usual, you're my buddy, you're my friend, and I think you're not wrong, but let me amplify the whole issue, why this came out now. You see, you and I talked about the entire torture a year and a half ago, Alex, and your audience had a detailed report from both you and me during the Boston Massacre, where exactly the exposure of 6,000 pages of torture documents were made by Asa Hutchinson and James Jones, implicating Hayden, implicating Brennan, implicating Bush, implicating Jeb, implicating a whole bunch of people and the neocons that we've talked about. So this came out in a year and a half ago. The question I want to tell your audience and the issue I want to bring up is, why was this brought up now, today? And in my opinion, it was brought up not because torture has stopped and not because it has absolved anybody of anything. On the contrary, it continues, and the CIA really doesn't care. It doesn't care what you think. It doesn't care what I think. It doesn't care what the president thinks. Why? Because this exposure by Feinstein is nothing more than an absolution of the Senate Intelligence Committee led by Dianne Feinstein and Jay Rockefeller, both who are leaving. And it's basically an absolution to say, oh, when we didn't know about the torture, but 8 years later we went into detail, and they revealed everything that you and I and the audience knew for 8 years.
So it's a giant butt covering. It's a giant butt covering operation.
Yes, that's the first part. The second part is the issue that you and I started 13 years ago, and they can't get away from it, and the audience knows this. And this is a complete distraction, again, from the Osama bin Laden false story. Because if you notice what comes out in the torture, Jose Rodriguez, this Puerto Rican little nothing, says, yes, I'm in charge of the torture, and I was the one that got the information to get Osama bin Laden. We know he was dead. We know that 9/11 was a stand-down. We know the Osama bin Laden SEAL raid was nonsense. We know Zero Dark 30 was nonsense. So what's coming out again is they're trying through another technique, the CIA and the administration, Obama, because he said he killed Osama bin Laden. Well, he killed nobody. And the CIA never killed Osama bin Laden because Osama bin Laden was already dead under Clinton when Clinton sent Dr. Dooley from the CIA to the Dubai hospital. So this is another way of getting to the Osama bin Laden story, which is another lie. In other words, the CIA and the administration, Obama, who is a CIA born and bred product of a single mother who was in the CIA, a maternal grandfather and grandfather who were in the CIA with a missing father, classical profile of the individual that's recruited by the CIA, as was Bill Clinton, with no father and a single mother. You see this repetitive strain of the personality profile. They're absolving Obama and saying, in effect, yes, he killed Osama bin Laden, and these were the facts that led to Osama bin Laden, all of which are lies. So this is, again, a distraction to absolve the senators, to say that Obama really isn't CIA and really did kill Osama bin Laden. We know that's not true. Where there's a Osama bin Laden, we know that's a lie. And then on top of that, they indicted themselves to avoid the very issue of 9/11 and stand down. And as you see, what they try to do is say, oh, Bush Jr., that moron, who knew exactly what he was doing, along with Cheney, the most nefarious and cowardly of all people, because he refused to serve our government 11 times. They basically are said that they didn't know about this, and so they blame Addington and a bunch of their junior people. So it makes Bush Jr. look as if he was really a hero coming forth to protect the CIA, when in fact he was covered by the CIA. So it avoids the issue of 9/11. Then we get down to another indictment that this whole drama of the absurd is creating, and that is the indictment of media exposition of the Anderson Coopers, the fair-haired, effete young men from Yale who had CIA internships, and they leaked out information. And as you will see in the report, they leaked out information to various people on the Washington Post, the New York Times, and elsewhere. And what you're seeing, and you'll say to yourself, but this sounds crazy, and the answer is no. The CIA is a reptilian organization. It's pretty much like a squid that will lose one arm, cut off another arm, so that it can regenerate again. Its only purpose is never to deny its existence, but to continue its nefarious existence. And it will cut off anybody who works with it, for it, or on it, and it doesn't matter whom. Whether it's John F. Kennedy, whether it's someone like Nixon who intervenes with it because he's not part of it, whether it's a Romney, whether it's a Reagan who was not part of it, and whether it was Bush who was part of it, whether it was Bill and Hillary Clinton, both very much steeped in the CIA because they were both at Yale. Bill Clinton reported to the CIA when he was on an Oxford scholarship. He denies it, but if you vet him out, and again, he's slippery, slick Bill, he'll lie all the time. He is a CIA operative and informant, as was Hillary. She was on the impeachment committee for Nixon. which by definition meant she worked for the CIA. She received the money on 9/11 to give to the victims, and it's still part of the CIA. So this is a way of cleaning the deck as well for Jeb Bush to run, who is also part of this family of the CIA.
All right, doctor, stay there. We got to go to break. Riveting stuff. I agree with what you're saying. It's just prima facie evidence right there. What comes next? Stay with us. Call in on this Wednesday, the 10th day of December, 2014. 800-259-9231. But we're just doing quick questions so you can answer and we can move to the next person. 800-259-9231. Also, we'll briefly talk about his new book coming out. I want to do a whole interview on the book in the near future. But before we get to that, I overall agree with what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. Plus, as you said, they can inject all the fake narratives into a report that exposes them. Supposedly,